Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another Lunch and Learn webinar series. We appreciate you joining us today. And as you may know, ISM is merged with SWK, so we have a lot more people joining our Lunch and Learns, and we welcome everyone. Also note that SWK has the largest Sage affiliate VAR program, so we would also like to welcome all of our PSP customers. If you have any questions on SWK and the ISM merger or any of our programs, please just let us know. My name is Sherry Palumbo, and I'm one of your SWK Customer Account Managers. It's my pleasure to introduce our presenters today. Without further ado, I'd first like to introduce Brittany Shelley, Partner Marketing Manager at AvidXchange, who will go over some housekeeping items before turning the stage over to Bob Lewis. Bob is the Vice President, Strategic Channels and Alliances at AvidXchange Incorporated. Brittany, it's all yours.
Thank you, Sherry. Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to cover a few housekeeping items for today's webinar. As you all may know, you are in listen-only mode. However, if you do have any questions, we would love to hear from you. So just put your questions into the questions box in your control panel, and we'll try to answer as many as we can at the end of the webinar. We will also launch a poll at the end of the webinar in order to capture the best way to follow up. Lastly, before I pass it over to Bob, following the webinar, SWK will provide the presentation deck along with the recording of the webinar. And that's all for me. So Bob, I'll go ahead and pass it over to you so you can introduce yourself and then cover the agenda for today.
Thank you, Brittany and Sherry. It is a pleasure to be with you all today. Appreciate your time and hope you find this presentation insightful and helpful. My role at AvidXchange is leading our partner team, and we're very fortunate to work with SWK and the ISM team, who's now together. SWK does a fantastic job helping their clients assess business process and then evaluate and implementing those solutions. We have many joint clients and appreciate the care and professionalism they support their clients with. So we appreciate the opportunity to work together and be partners. Our session today, we're going to talk about some of the challenges associated with the manual AP process, some of the latest industry stats, the benefits of automating, and then a bit of a demo, an overview of AvidXchange, and we plan to have some time left for Q&A. This webinar is scheduled for an hour. I hope to get through the presentation portion in 35 minutes, so we should have plenty of time for Q&A and probably wrap up a little bit early. So with that, I will jump in and we'll start with some of the challenges currently faced in accounts payable. So, you know, the AP process for most companies is still paper-based. It's manually driven with huge inefficiency and frustrating challenges for finance teams and the rest of the company. You know, stemming from the fact that managing paper is a huge challenge for companies in the mid-market. You know, the storage of the paper itself, you know, dealing with the mountains of paper that come and invoices that come in month after month. They come in many different formats, making it confusing for teams, for AP teams, and perhaps for those who are looking to take the first step with scanning and document management. There's still a significant challenge. And then the approval processes are typically manual and often take too long. So the impacts of all that are significant. You know, we see late payments, upset suppliers and vendors, sometimes service interruptions, often lack of visibility into spending, and surprises sometimes for management around budget impacts, and generally a lot of time spent researching invoices that are somewhere in the process. And we hear sometimes as much as half the time an AP professional spends in their day could be chasing down approvals and following up on questions from the team or from vendors. So there's a lot of pain in there. For those companies who are interested in automating AP, there's some challenges and some misperceptions out there. Sometimes there's a fear that adding a vendor in between may provide a delay in receiving information and getting that into the system. Well, actually the opposite is true. Leveraging a company like AvidXchange to capture all your invoices, done the way we do it at least, reduces all those bottlenecks, getting all the information in efficiently, and we'll run through that in a bit. The other big, and this is probably the biggest one, is creating that business case, getting the budget to invest in automating. The SWK team's great at helping their clients through this, capturing some of the basic data that's needed, how many invoices and checks and time is spent dealing with them, cost per invoice, and some other key metrics that'll help you create a business case to quickly assess some of the core financial and business process benefits. And then there are sometimes perceptions around alternate payment methods and security and dealing with payments. And in fact, one of the biggest advantages of leveraging a service like ours is that you dramatically improve your security and enhance the payment options available to suppliers and vendors, which with our team, we do that heavy lifting. Our team will reach out to 100% of our clients, suppliers and vendors, validating the information that we have to make payments, understanding their payment preferences, and working with them to provide the best, most efficient options to them. And what we found is that when customers are responsible for collecting and moving their suppliers and vendors to an electronic payment on their own and with their bank, they generally only find 10 to maybe 12%, in some cases 15% of their vendors accepting electronic payments. It's just a lot of work to reach out, to get the banking information, to keep track of it all, to encourage those vendors and suppliers to make the change. You know, finance teams are so busy dealing with all that they have on their plate that actually being proactive with suppliers and vendors sometimes doesn't get focused on as much as it could. So, and we help alleviate those challenges and educate you and your teams to help you understand all that. So in addition to all the time savings, I alluded to some of this previously, some of the other core benefits are around fraud protection, reducing the number of checks out there and providing positive pay with the checks that are created so that there's a validation on the check number and amount by the bank when cashing or when accepting the payment, making the payment. Insight into the data for the individuals internally who need to approve and view information, up-to-date reporting. So this big step here allows the finance team to be more proactive and provide better visibility around cash flow to the business. And then another big benefit is streamlining the process for approvals. So tracking all those invoices electronically, streamlining the workflows, and having a central repository. So with that, you know, in addition to that huge benefit of time savings, there's other very significant business benefits as a finance team who's responsible for, you know, looking after the bottom line, managing risk, and providing reporting to management. So some industry stats. So what does it cost? Through a number of analysts, I've seen data, and it all lines up very similarly to about $15 an invoice and around $7 a payment. So for a total of $22 is what it typically costs a business to deal with an invoice and make a payment when they're doing this process manually. And then after automating with the time and the service costs, that's typically reduced by 60%. With AvidXchange, our clients enjoy about a $10 cost. So there's some significant cost savings in the automation process there. Some other stats, it generally takes about 12 days for a company to process an invoice in a manual method, getting the invoice in, opening the mail, getting into the system, the time to key it in, to route it to the right place for approval, which may require mailing invoices or moving paper, might include email alerts, other steps that take time. And the improvement is dramatic, providing customers down to just 3.5 days to process an invoice after automation. So it gives you time to act, time to take advantage of discounts, time to decide which a little more time to decide which ones to pay and when to pay, and for those that are looking to accelerate their close, a much quicker set of information to close the books. So this is another big benefit for those finance teams looking to accelerate close. Automating AP is a big step. And then another challenge, some companies feel like, hey, we've started with document management. We're trying to get our arms around the paper. And so we're maybe starting to scan, we're starting to get in email invoices, and while that's helpful, the AP process sometimes isn't any faster. And in fact, this research from the state of e-payables, which is by Ardent Partners, gives data to suggest that there is in fact no benefit of just the document management step. Getting the data off those invoices, the workflow approval process is where really a big bulk of the time savings come in. And so therefore, you still need to think about the rest of the automation steps in the process. So I mentioned fraud and reducing the risk of fraud as one of the key benefits. So here's a stat that I find very interesting. 75% of companies that do experience payment fraud, it's because they've fallen victim to check fraud. So there's a bogus check out there that's been created. And that happens as a result of paper being out there, and those checks being out there in a format that is not a positive pay format. And so when you're producing a lot of checks, dropping those checks in the mail, those checks are circulating around the vendors and suppliers, there's risk. And there's risk of getting those checks and altering them, or trying to copy and replace them with alternatives. And the positive pay check stock and banking process is a great step to eliminate and protect yourself from that fraud risk. So let's talk about specifically some of the benefits of AP automation for a few minutes, and then we'll jump into the demo. So, so we talked about a number of them today. I'll kind of walk through this list, and then elimination of dual entry. So a lot of times you've got to enter data in, you get it in, you got to key it in again, and by automating, you eliminate that step altogether. There's a much better user experience with the AvidXchange user experience to see your invoices and payments. You can see that in a bit. We have the ability to have customized and detailed and distributed approval workflows. So we'll touch on that. It's a very powerful yet easy to use tool for that. With accounting and reporting and visibility into the invoice and payment status and approvals at your fingertips, that's That's a huge benefit. As I mentioned previously, sometimes half the time of an AP professional's day is spent dealing with chasing information like this. When it's all at your fingertips in one central repository, it makes that a snap and saves our customers tremendous amounts of time. A key aspect of the integration is that we capture information from invoices and approval workflow, put it back into the accounting system. The accounting system remains the system of record where payments are authorized from, and then it pushes it to AvidXchange again, where we execute all those payments, which initiate from the accounting system. So there's, the benefits are compelling from an RO perspective. It's relatively easy to document, and generally these benefits align with a lot of the common priorities that we're finding with CFOs today. And finally, these solutions are low cost to get started and have immediate benefit. So there's a very quick time to value. So when you take on a project and you implement, you're really just a few months away from relief and improving your process. And it's a very quick time to value. So one other common concern is if we're going to automate this process, what does it mean for the team, for the jobs, for the people? And 9 times out of 10, what we find is that our customers are growing and they're looking for ways to grow without hiring. They're looking for ways to help their team shift to more proactive functions. They're not usually reducing staff, and so it really enables employees to focus on more high-level strategic strategic tasks without hiring additional staff. So let's take a look at the product. And before I do that, I'll provide just a little overview of the process that we probably all know very well. The AP process has many steps in it, and they're quite manual, from receiving an invoice and opening the mail and working on assessing, is there a PO related? How do we route this? Who does it go to? Does it get to the AP team? Is it another team first? The coding of that invoice, keying the data in, the approval process, which could require moving paper to multiple places, or email workflow, many steps. Is it in budget? Getting it back into the accounting system. After approving it, getting it all into the GL, producing checks or sending off a positive pay file to the bank, filing the paper, dealing with the paper, going and getting old paper that needs to be reviewed with research and following up on items. I'm tired just thinking about it. And I think that the advantage here is where you see these AvidXchange logos, we're improving that process, either entirely automating it or pre-populating solutions so that it's a snap to view. So you really only have a few steps. So after getting data in, assessing the header information, coding it if there's any specific, departments, projects, customers, however you break out your costs, it can be put into detail. The approval step, we do need department leaders and other people to approve invoices, and we make that process simple, but it does still require that approval. And then the posting of the GL, there is a step there, and it is an efficient step, but nonetheless, there's when a batch is complete and you want to post it to the general ledger, you do need to actually post it, which is a good step and a control. Before showing you the AvidInvoice solution, I just want to touch on the different ways that invoices get into the system. So we typically find they come in 3 ways: an email, so the vendor suppliers got an email process to send you their PDF version of an invoice, or you get the paper and you need to scan it, and you can scan and upload to AvidXchange, or the paper comes directly to Avid. We have the ability to set up a PO box and to manage the mail, essentially, open, scan, and get the invoices into the system electronically. So we receive the invoices, we capture the header detail, and then we begin the routing for approval, and that's where we start. And so this is really the first screen that the team will see. They'll see their invoice, my invoice inbox, and in it, here you see all of the invoices that are associated with that I need to take action on, that I need to approve. And so if I know what these are, and I am familiar with them, or I'm confident they've gone through the approvals for my team, I can click, and approve in a snap, and it can be very, very efficient. If I need to drill down and see more information, there's more I can do. I'll show in a sec. You can also go back or see, yeah, right. So when you click through, you would see the invoice header information that we've taken off the invoice, the image itself, and then we have more detail here in these tabs, and I'll share with you a few of them. So the distributions, this is where the coding takes place. So you may have a default distribution for this vendor, and it could be, in this case, broken out between these 2 accounts. So you might have different accounts or budgets or customers, and you can tailor, we can tailor these for you, these columns, and you can have the level of detail required to suit the specific requirements of your company's finance process. If you want to change them, you can do that here, and then it remembers. So you'll have a default process for a particular vendor or location. And so those are the 2 primary: who is the supplier, what is the location, and those will typically drive the accounting behavior here and the workflow process. You'll see comments. So we'll keep track of any comments that are made. So if it was forwarded along to someone, or comments made on whether or not a supplier completed the job, the vendor delivered the merchandise, whatever it is, it can be tracked here. You'll see what the standard workflow is. So let's say you do get a question, this invoice hasn't been paid. You can see exactly where it sits and the other steps in the workflow in order to get the approval completed. And so you see in this case, the very first step in the process is the manager needs to approve. And so Ann Howard or Charlotte Jenkins both can log in and approve that. And then after that, it flows up to Jerry Rodriguez, the director, Pablo, the VP, Charlotte Jenkins again as in the AP department. And then an audit trail is a big step. So we have here the history, the data of what happened when it came in, when it was documented, and then all the steps so that you know when it arrived and how it was approved. Okay, so that's a brief view of the invoice approval and workflow process. Note that all those screens are also smart device friendly. So whether you're looking at those on your phone or your iPad or your other tablet device, the format is simple, easy, and so it's cloud as well as mobile. and same for the payment process here. So the steps in this workflow, after the accounting system generates the payments, so the invoice approvals have been completed, and then you've selected payments to be paid, the payment process in AvidXchange begins. So then from there, you will push those payments into the system, and then they're being routed, and money is pulled from the bank accounts and then paid to the customers, paid to the suppliers and vendors by virtual card, AvidPay Direct, which is essentially a smart ACH process, enhanced ACH process that includes the amount, rich remittance data in the transaction itself in the bank account, but it also is accompanied by an email so that the vendor sees it both in email as well as in their bank account at the same time. And then there's the AvidPay check, which is the positive pay check we spoke about, and that would also be mailed by AvidXchange to the supplier. So we'll look at some of those screens. So after those payments have been made, you'll see those approvals here in the process. So these are pending final approval for me to send out. As an approver in the payment process, I'm an AP, typically an AP person, or maybe it's a significant amount that's going to go up the chain to a controller or a CFO for payment. I can review these. If I'm comfortable with them all, click, 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 and approve, or I can drill into one. Before I do that, I'll look at the batch to see the history. So I can see the history of this batch and the details in it, and I can see these different payments, the check numbers to the vendor and the details. And if I need to go further into that, I can open it up. I can see the specific details around a specific transaction, open up, click on the invoice image, and get all the data that I need. So to recap, the AvidXchange Pay application. So you continue to select payments from your accounting system like you do today, which then feeds into AvidPay. So you never have to print, sign stuff, mail vendor checks. You have a dramatic improvement in fraud protection. You never have to produce a positive pay file for your bank. Again, for those of you who are doing positive pay files, I know that can be a challenging step, and sometimes it's a step that adds one other possible mistake. We do that on your behalf and with 100% accuracy. So you don't have to manage the supplier bank account info. We do that for you, and we maintain the existing bank relationships and bank accounts with real-time access to payment status of every payment. And so with 24/7 visibility into the status of payments, you can just better manage cash flow and improve the process overall. So with that, I would love to hear questions.
Thanks, Bob. So before we start Q&A, Sherry is going to launch a poll question, and basically this is just going to help us to capture the best way to follow up with you. But before we begin the Q&A, I do want to let everyone know that if there are any questions that are not addressed during Q&A or that might involve pricing or something specific to your business, you can contact your respective CAM, or you can send an email to camteam@swktech.com. And as a reminder, we also will be sending out the recording of this webinar. So as you guys start to fill out the poll question, we'll take any questions that are coming in. And Bob, the first question that we have is, can I send all of my vendor payments through AvidPay?
all payments, there are some types of payments that inherently are manual. So you have maybe an employee's last day. You sometimes do payroll checks and expense reimbursements through another process. But your AP payments, we do virtually all your payments. Some of the more complicated ones can be payments sometimes to utilities, which we do. They sometimes have an IVR process, and we have teams and smart automation that allows us to do even make those kinds of payments on behalf of our customers.
Okay, great, thank you. And we have time for one more question. So what is the implementation timeline and process?
So implementation timeframes can certainly vary. We have a guaranteed 45-day implementation process, and that does have some mutual requirements that go with it. We'll need to see certain level of data and set up information in order to get things done according to that time frame. It can be done quicker in some cases, but that generally seems to be about the 45 to 60 days. Sometimes our customers need more time to pull together information, or they rethink their department coding or something before they get started. So it could be longer, but in general, about a month and a half, 6 weeks is a good guideline.
Okay, great. So Sherry, I'm not sure if any other questions have come in, but we certainly will follow up with anyone if there were any questions that came in that we did not answer. Also, for this poll question, for anyone that stated that they would like to see a demo or more information on AP automation, we will certainly make sure to reach out to you. I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. And Bob or Sherry, are there any additional notes that you would like to add before we close out?
I don't have anything except to thank you both for the exceptional presentation and great content that we saw today. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Sherry. Pleasure to be here with everybody today. Thank you for your time, your questions, and please reach out to your SWK team. I know they would love to hear from you if you have more.
Thank you, guys.